They said no human could stop a galactic expansion, yet the invasion ended on one small Kansas farm. The aliens came with warships and treaties, and left bringing casseroles every Sunday. So what did one old man do that made the universe pull up a chair? Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe to see why. Samuel Whitaker woke at 5:47 a.m., same as he had for the past 53 years. The dawn light filtered through the bedroom curtains Martha had sewn back in '68, casting familiar shadows across the dresser where her photograph still smiled at him. He touched the frame gently, whispered, "Morning, sweetheart," and began his day. The coffee was brewing when he heard the dogs, not their usual morning grumbling, but something different, something wrong. Both hounds stood frozen in the yard, staring at the empty sky with their hackles raised. Sam frowned, following their gaze to the cloudless Kansas horizon. Nothing there, just endless blue and the corn swaying in fields that had fed 3 generations of Whitakers. But the dogs knew. They were coming back. By noon, the ships descended, not with the dramatic flair of old sci-fi movies, but with the casual indifference of bureaucrats arriving to foreclose a mortgage. 3 vessels, sleek as polished stones, settling onto his north field and crushing 2 months of work beneath their landing gear. Sam watched from his porch, shotgun resting across his lap, not as threat, but as statement. This was his land. Had been since 1952, when his grandfather handed him the deed with dirt still under both their fingernails. The aliens emerged wearing what Sam could only describe as business casual for conquering. The tall one, silver-skinned and angular in ways that hurt to look at directly, approached with a tablet that glowed with incomprehensible symbols. Behind him, 2 scientists in containment suits hovered like nervous interns, and a hulking soldier type scanned the property with weapons Sam recognized even if their design was foreign. "Samuel Whitaker," the tall one announced, his voice processed through a translator that made him sound like a disappointed principal. "I am Commander Veros of the Arcturian Conglomerate. We have filed the appropriate documentation with your planetary government. This property sits atop a Class A energy convergence point, critical to galactic infrastructure. You have 72 hours to vacate." Sam took a slow sip of his lemonade, set the glass down with deliberate care. "Son, I don't know what your fancy scanner told you, but this here's private property. Deeds registered at the county courthouse since before your government was probably even a thought. This is not a negotiation. Then you don't know American farmers." What followed was 3 hours of the most polite standoff Sam had experienced since arguing with Martha about whether tomatoes belonged in fruit salad. Veros presented legal documents from 14 different galactic councils. Sam countered with his property deed, his tax receipts, and a surprisingly detailed lecture on Kansas land rights that made the younger scientist take notes. When Veros threatened to involve Earth's government, Sam reminded him that Earth's government didn't own this particular 5 acres, and last he checked, the Constitution still meant something around here. Finally frustrated, Veros ordered his team to activate the energy point anyway. The scientists set up equipment that hummed and whirred, covering his North 40 in a web of glowing conduits. Lights danced, machines beeped, energy signatures allegedly converged, and absolutely nothing happened. The scientist, a female with iridescent skin who'd introduced herself as Lyria, ran diagnostics 3 times. Each result came back the same: impossible. The reading showed the energy point was there, massive and powerful, but completely dormant. "Perhaps your equipment is broken," Sam offered helpfully, refilling his lemonade. Veros's expression could have curdled milk. He barked orders in a language that sounded like crystals breaking. More tests, different machines, same results. Lyria looked genuinely confused now, pulling up holographic data that floated between her hands like trapped lightning. Then, Sam stood up to check on the dogs, and every machine screamed to life. Energy readings spiked so high that Lyria actually stumbled backward. The moment Sam crossed the property line, everything went dark again. When he returned, the readings returned. The silence that followed was beautiful. Lyria whispered something to Veros that Sam couldn't hear, but he caught the translation. It's impossible. But the convergence point is responding to his bioelectric signature. It only activates when he's present. Veros turned to Sam with an expression somewhere between fury and fascination. You're saying this energy point requires your presence to function? Sam shrugged. Don't rightly know what you're measuring, Commander, but this is my land. Has been my whole life. Seems like it knows that. Then we have a problem, Veros said coldly. Because the conglomerate requires this resource, and human attachment to dirt is not sufficient grounds to deny galactic progress. He leaned closer. Tomorrow, we return with a full extraction team. You can leave on your own feet, Mr. Whitaker, or we'll remove you. The choice is yours. As the ships lifted off, cornstalks bending under alien thrust, Sam sat back down with his lemonade and looked at Martha's photograph in the window. The evening sun caught it just right, making her seem alive again. Well, sweetheart, he said softly, looks like we're about to have company, whether we like it or not. Behind him, the Earth hummed with energy that no scanner could truly measure. Not because it was alien technology they didn't understand, but because it was something far more powerful. It was memory. It was home. It was 53 years of coffee on this porch, watching the sun rise over land that held more than just his crops. It held Martha's grave, under the old oak tree she'd planted the year they married. And Sam Whitaker wasn't going anywhere. The news hit global feeds within hours. Elderly Farmer Halt's galactic expansion read the more sympathetic outlets. Stubborn human threatens Earth's membership status, declared others. Sam watched the reports on his ancient television, the same one Martha had insisted they buy for the moon landing, and felt the weight of a world on his shoulders. By dawn, his property line was no longer empty. Pickup trucks formed a perimeter, their owners standing silent and determined. His neighbors, people he'd known for 60 years, had come without being asked. Old Jim Patterson with his Vietnam cap, the Rodriguez family with their 3 generations of farmers, even young Amy Chen from the new organic farm had driven 40 miles to stand with him. They didn't say much. Farmers rarely did. But their presence said everything. When Veros returned at precisely 800 hours, he found his landing zone blocked by a wall of humans armed with nothing more than coffee thermoses and stubborn Kansas pride. The commander's expression, already difficult to read on his alien features, somehow managed to convey exasperation. But it was Lyria who approached the line first, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding protocol. She walked right up to Sam, her instruments scanning, recording, analyzing. "I don't understand," she said, and her voice through the translator carried genuine confusion rather than condescension. "The energy signature is tied to your biological presence, but that's impossible. Energy convergence points are geological phenomena. They don't respond to organic life." Sam gestured to his porch. "Care for some coffee? Easier to talk sitting down." 10 minutes later, the alien scientist sat in Martha's chair, the one with the faded sunflower cushion, holding a mug of coffee she couldn't drink but seemed to appreciate the warmth of. Sam settled into his usual spot and watched the morning light catch the corn the way it had for 53 years. "This land," he began slowly, "has been in my family since 1889. My great-grandfather broke ground here. My grandfather planted that oak tree when Kansas was still fighting over statehood. My father taught me which fields flooded and which stayed dry through drought. And Martha—" He paused, his voice catching. "Martha and I planted every single tree you see out there. That maple by the road, our first anniversary, the willows near the creek, when our son was born, the oak grove on the South Ridge. Every year we were married, we planted one together." Lyria's instruments hummed softly, recording data she didn't quite understand. "But those are just trees, organic matter. Why would they affect an energy convergence point?" "Because they're not just trees," Sam said quietly. "They're 47 years of love. Their promises kept. They're the morning she told me she was pregnant, and the afternoon we learned our boy was safe home from the war. Their every Sunday dinner, every argument we had and made up from, every time one of us was sick and the other sat up all night worried. He looked at Lyria directly. Your scanners can measure energy, ma'am. But can they measure what it means to build a life in one place? To pour yourself into soil and have it pour back into you? My species eliminated such attachments millennia ago, Lyria said, almost mechanically. We found they impeded efficiency and logical decision-making. Must get lonely. Something flickered across Lyria's features. Not quite emotion, but perhaps the memory of what emotion had been. She stood abruptly, requesting permission to run additional tests. Sam agreed, on condition that she explain what she was looking for in terms he could understand. What followed was fascinating. Lyria had Sam walk the property while her equipment tracked his movements and the energy point's responses. When he stood in the workshop where he'd built furniture for 40 years, the readings spiked. When he sat on the porch swing he'd made for Martha's 50th birthday, they surged higher. When he walked to the south field and stood exactly where he'd taught his son to drive a tractor, the entire grid lit up like Christmas. And then Sam walked to the old oak tree, Martha's oak, the one she'd planted the day they married, declaring it would outlive them both and keep watch over their land when they were gone. He placed his hand on the bark, rough and familiar, and said softly, "Morning, sweetheart. We've got visitors." Every instrument Lyria held went completely haywire. Energy readings didn't just spike, they transformed into patterns her science couldn't categorize. The translator struggled to convey her shock. That's impossible. The convergence point is directly beneath this tree. The readings suggest it's not geological at all. It's... She trailed off, staring at her instruments in disbelief. It's what? Sam asked gently. It's responding to emotional resonance, to memory, to something my species doesn't have words for anymore because we engineered it out of ourselves. She looked up at Sam with something that might have been wonder or might have been loss. We removed this capability from our biology 4,000 years ago. We thought it made us weak. From across the yard, Veyros called out, impatient, time for another relocation proposal. Earth's government was offering Sam a new property, twice the size, anywhere on the planet he wanted. Financial compensation beyond his wildest dreams, a place in history as the man who brought Earth into the galactic community. All he had to do was leave. Sam looked at Martha's tree, its branches reaching toward skies she'd never see again, roots deep in soil that held her now. He thought about their wedding day, how she'd laughed when he'd carried her over the threshold of a house that was barely more than a shack. How they'd built everything together, piece by piece, year by year, until 5 acres became a universe. Tell them no, he said simply. Lyria started to protest, but then Sam showed her something on his phone. A photo from 8 years ago? Martha, gray and beautiful, standing under this same oak tree, surrounded by every tree they'd planted together. The last good picture before the cancer. She's buried here, Sam said quietly. Right here, under this tree. It was her favorite spot on Earth. And she loved this place more than anywhere in the galaxy could ever matter. His voice strengthened. So no, I'm not leaving. Not for money. Not for a better house. Not for your galactic progress. He looked Lyria in the eyes. Because some things are worth more than efficiency. Some things are worth being stubborn about. Some things are worth standing your ground for, even when the whole universe tells you to move. For the first time in 140 years, Lyria felt water on her face. She touched the dampness, confused. Her biology shouldn't allow this. Her genetic modifications had removed tear ducts, had eliminated the physical responses to emotional stimuli. Yet there it was, salt water, running down her iridescent skin. She was crying, and she didn't understand why. But as she looked at the old man standing guard over his wife's grave, at the trees planted in love, at the land that held more than just minerals and energy readings, she began to remember something her species had forgotten. She remembered what it meant to miss home. That evening, as the alien ships maintained their perimeter, Veros presented his final offer, relocation with the promise to physically move Martha's remains to any location Sam chose. Government-backed, legally binding. Sam's response was simple. Martha's already where she chose to be, and so am I. As darkness fell, Lyria sat alone reviewing her data, trying to understand readings that defied every principle of convergence theory she'd studied. The energy point wasn't geological. It wasn't responding to Sam's biology. It was responding to something far more powerful, something her science had no instruments to measure. It was responding to 53 years of love, crystallized in soil and memory. It was responding to what remains when someone pours their entire heart into one piece of earth. It was responding to the most powerful force in any universe. It was responding to home. And as Lyria finally labeled her findings in the report that would change everything, she wrote words that would make no sense to conglomerate analysts. The convergence point is not a resource to be extracted. It is a monument, and the human is not its keeper. He is its foundation. The conglomerate's response was swift and bureaucratic. By week's end, Earth faced its first galactic sanctions, trade routes closed, technology transfers suspended, 3 colony missions canceled. The news stations ran endless debates. Was one old man's stubbornness worth humanity's place in the cosmos? Editorials called Sam everything from hero to terrorist. The White House issued carefully worded statements about respecting property rights while urging reasonable compromise. Sam stopped watching the news after the third death threat arrived by email. He focused instead on his corn, which didn't care about galactic politics and still needed watering. But the isolation was harder than he'd expected. Reporters camped at his property line until the neighbors ran them off. Drones buzzed overhead until someone's teenage grandson brought out a pellet gun and settled that problem, country-style. Even the local diners started debating whether to serve him, though Betty shut that down fast with a coffee pot and some choice words about loyalty. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like any other, a rental car pulled up the drive. Sam recognized the walk before he saw the face. That same determined stride, that military bearing. His son. Jacob Whitaker looked like a stranger wearing a familiar face. Expensive suit. City haircut. The kind of success that Martha would have been so proud of, and that somehow made Sam feel further away than ever. They hadn't spoken in 12 years, not since the funeral, when Jacob had suggested selling the farm, and Sam had suggested something anatomically improbable in return. Dad. Jacob's voice was tight, professional, the voice of someone about to deliver bad news. We need to talk. They sat on the porch, 2 feet apart and a lifetime distant. Jacob pulled out a tablet showing real estate offers, relocation packages, financial projections that made Sam's annual income look like pocket change. He explained, calmly and rationally, why this was the only logical choice, why staying was not just stubborn but actively harmful to Earth's future, why personal sentiment couldn't outweigh global consequences. "Sell the damned farm, Dad." Sam said nothing, just looked at the land Martha had loved. "I know you miss her." Jacob's voice cracked slightly. "God, I miss her too, but she's gone. She's been gone 8 years. And this," he gestured at the property, "this is just dirt, it's not her. It's not worth destroying your relationship with your son over. It's not worth making Earth a pariah over. It's just dirt." "That's where you're wrong, son." "Then explain it to me. Make me understand why you'd rather have this farm than have me in your life. Why you'd rather fight the entire galaxy than just take the money and move. Why this matters more than everything else." Sam stood slowly, joints aching in that way that reminded him he was 76 and running out of time to make things right. "You remember when you were 8, when the tornado came through?" Jacob blinked, thrown by the non-sequitur. "Sure, we sheltered in the basement." "Your mother made you stay down there after the all-clear. You thought she was being overprotective. But I went up first to check the damage, and Jacob..." Sam's voice went soft. "Half the roof was gone. The bedroom where you'd been sleeping 2 hours before was just gone. and all I could think was how close we'd come. How this land had almost taken you from us." He turned to face his son. "But it didn't. And you know what your mother did? She stood in that wreckage and she thanked this farm. She actually thanked it. Said any place that could protect her family through something like that deserved their loyalty forever. She made me promise, right there in the ruins, that we'd rebuild, that we'd stay, that we'd honor the land that kept us safe. That's just survivor's guilt talking, Dad. She was traumatized. She was wise." Sam's eyes were wet now. "She understood something you've forgotten living in your city with your suits and your logic. She understood that some things are worth being irrational about. That love isn't something you can spreadsheet your way out of, that a promise made in the worst moments is the truest kind." Jacob stood abruptly. "You're choosing dirt over your own son." "I'm choosing to keep a promise to your mother. There's a difference." "Then I guess that's it." Jacob's voice went cold. "I tried. The lawyers tried. The whole damn planet tried. But you're just a stubborn old man who'd rather die on this hill than admit maybe, just maybe, you're wrong." He made it 3 steps toward his car before Sam spoke again. "You were born under that maple tree." Jacob froze. "Your mother's water broke during a picnic. I wanted to drive to the hospital, but she said there wasn't time. So we laid out blankets right there, and Dr. Patterson came out from town, and you came into this world under a tree we'd planted on our first anniversary. The first sound you heard was wind through leaves. Your mother and I had watched grow from saplings." Sam's voice broke. "And when the doctor handed you to Martha, she looked at me and said, 'He's part of this place now. This land is his birthright.' She loved you so much, Jacob. Everything she poured into this farm was for you." The silence stretched between them like years. "You really think she'd want you dying alone out here?" Jacob's voice was barely a whisper. "I think she'd want me keeping my promises." Jacob left without another word. The rental car disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust that looked like regret. Sam sat back down and discovered his coffee had gone cold. Story of his life lately. Everything going cold. That evening, the children from Plainview Elementary walked up his drive carrying drawings, crayon pictures of farms and stars, messages in uncertain handwriting. "Thank you for not giving up." "You're a hero, Mr. Sam." "My grandma says you're brave." They hung them on his fence like prayer flags, like hopes, like reminders that sometimes standing firm means something to people you'll never meet. Sam stared at those drawings until the sun set, feeling the weight of every expectation. Who was he to represent humanity? He was just an old man who couldn't let go, just a widower clinging to ghosts. Maybe Jacob was right. Maybe he was just being selfish. He almost called the lawyers, almost signed the papers, almost gave in. Then Veyros showed up with an ultimatum and a threat. The conglomerate was done negotiating. Earth's government had agreed to forced removal under galactic eminent domain. Military extraction team would arrive in 72 hours. If Sam resisted, he'd be classified as a hostile insurgent and treated accordingly. "This is your last chance to walk away, Mr. Whitaker." Something in Sam snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a branch bent too far that finally achieves its true shape through breaking. He stood tall, Marine training from 60 years ago, suddenly evident in his posture, and looked Veyros dead in whatever passed for eyes. "You ever wonder why that energy point only works when I'm here, Commander? Your scientist figured it out. It's not the land. It's not biology. It's memory. It's love. It's 53 years of morning coffee and evening sunsets and every moment in between that made this place sacred. And you know what really pisses me off?" He stepped closer. "You think you can measure that, quantify it, put it in your reports and your treaties and your galactic law. You think love is just chemical reactions you evolved past. You think memory is just electrical signals you optimized away. You think what Martha and I built here is just real estate." His voice went quiet, deadly. "You're wrong, and I'm going to prove it." That night, while Lyria frantically ran new tests, she made a discovery that chilled her to her genetically modified core. The energy point wasn't responding to Sam's presence, it was responding to his memories of Martha. Every time he thought of her, every time he touched something they'd built together, every time he stood where they'd stood together, the energy spiked. The convergence point wasn't geological, it was biographical, it was emotional, it was alive. And as a conglomerate strike force entered orbit, preparing to remove one stubborn old man by whatever means necessary, Lyria realized something terrifying. If they took Sam by force, if they made him leave against his will, the energy wouldn't just go dormant, it would detonate. Because grief that concentrated, love that focused, memory that crystallized into physical energy didn't just disappear, it exploded. And Sam Whitaker, standing guard over his wife's grave with nothing but a promise and a will of iron, had no idea he was sitting on an emotional bomb that could level half of Kansas. The strike force would arrive in 48 hours, and time was running out. The strike force arrived like Judgment Day. 12 ships, military grade, bristling with technology that could disassemble a mountain and reassemble it on another planet. They formed a perimeter around Sam's property at dawn, their shadows falling across corn that had survived drought, flood, and tornado, but might not survive progress. Commander Veyros delivered the final notice personally, flanked by armed units whose weapons hummed with barely contained force. 48 hours to evacuate. No exceptions, no appeals. This was happening. But when the deadline arrived, Veyros found himself facing something his military academy training had never prepared him for. Ordinary courage in extraordinary numbers. They came from everywhere, from Plainview and beyond, from cities and farms, from coasts and mountains, teachers and mechanics, doctors and truckers, the employed and unemployed, young and old, every shade of human stubbornness wearing jeans and work boots, and expressions that said, "Try us." Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, forming a human wall between the alien strike force and one old man who'd simply said no. They carried no weapons, no technology, just bodies and determination, and the absolutely irrational belief that standing together meant something. That some lines weren't meant to be crossed, even by the whole damn galaxy. From his porch, Sam stared at the crowd in disbelief. He recognized faces from town, from the next county over. Strangers who'd driven 20 hours to stand on his land. A woman held a sign reading, "Property rights are human rights." A kid, couldn't be more than 10, waved a Kansas flag. Old Jim Patterson stood front and center, flanked by the entire Rodriguez family and what looked like half the population of 3 surrounding towns. When Sam tried to tell them to leave, to save themselves, Amy Chen just smiled and said, "If they take you, they take all of us." Isn't that how community works? Veyros received the call from Arcturus Prime at 1400 hours. His commanders were not pleased. The situation had become a public relations nightmare. Human media was broadcasting live. Alien social networks were debating. The conglomerate's reputation for peaceful integration was in tatters. And it was all because of one small farm and one impossibly stubborn species. The message was clear. Complete the mission or lose your command. No more delays. No more excuses. Use whatever force necessary. Veyros stood alone in his command ship, staring at screens showing thermal images of humans standing in Kansas heat, refusing to move. 230 years of military service, 12 successful integration campaigns, 0 failures. His career defined by efficiency, by following protocol, by believing that galactic progress justified any cost. Until now. Sam found him standing at the property line near sunset, staring at Martha's oak tree with an expression that was almost human. The commander didn't acknowledge Sam's approach, just kept looking at the tree like it held answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. "You lost someone too," Sam said quietly. Not a question. Veyros was silent for so long that Sam thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice stripped of its usual authority, "I was 6 years old when the conglomerate integrated my homeworld. My species was classified as probationary, like yours, promising but primitive, in need of guidance. He touched the bark of the oak, his alien fingers tracing patterns only he could see. They said our attachment to ancestral lands was holding us back, that we needed to centralize, urbanize, optimize, that progress required sacrifice. They took your home. They took everyone's homes. Entire continents relocated for resource extraction. My family's land, where my ancestors had lived for 4,000 years, became a mining facility. They offered compensation, new housing and efficient population centers. They called it advancement. Veros's voice was hollow. I never questioned it. I joined the conglomerate, rose through ranks, helped integrate 17 other worlds using the same protocols. I believed we were helping. But you weren't. Ina, I don't know anymore. He looked at Sam with eyes that held 2 centuries of certainty crumbling. Your species is inefficient, emotional. You make decisions based on feelings rather than data. You cling to dirt and dead people and promises that serve no logical purpose. By every metric the conglomerate uses, you're primitive. He gestured at the crowd of humans still standing vigil. But they're here, not because they know you, not because it's logical, not because there's personal gain. They're here because something in your stubbornness resonates with something in their stubbornness, because your refusal to let go reminds them what it means to hold on. He turned back to the tree. My people forgot how to do that. We optimized away every attachment, made ourselves efficient, logical, advanced, and we lost something we can never get back. It's not too late. Veros almost laughed. I have my orders, Mr. Whitaker. In 6 hours, we begin forced removal. If you or any human resists, we're authorized to use lethal force. This conversation changes nothing. Doesn't it? Before Veros could respond, a rental car came tearing up the drive, gravel spraying. Jacob burst out, wild-eyed, running toward Sam. Dad, don't let them take you. I was wrong. I was so goddamn wrong. He nearly tackled Sam with the force of his embrace. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. About everything. About not understanding. About choosing logic over love. About forgetting what Mom taught us. He pulled back, tears streaming. I was driving back to the airport and I passed that maple tree where I was born, and I remembered. I remembered her holding me, her telling me stories, her teaching me to see magic in ordinary things. And I realized what I'd lost wasn't just her. It was the part of me that knew how to love places, not just use them. The part that understood home isn't something you can rebuild somewhere else. Sam held his son for the first time in 12 years and felt something in his chest unknot. You're here now. That's what matters. Around them, more people gathered. News drones captured every moment. The world watched as father and son reconciled under an alien deadline, as community stood firm, as one old man's fight became everyone's fight. Someone started singing "America the Beautiful," and it spread through the crowd like wildfire, voices joining in imperfect harmony that somehow made the corn grow taller. At midnight, Veros gave the order. The strike force moved in with extraction equipment designed to remove entire buildings intact. They would take Sam, his house, even Martha's oak tree if necessary. Transport it all to a new location, fulfill the mission, maintain efficiency. But the moment they activated the displacement field, every alarm in every ship went critical. The energy point, dormant for days, suddenly exploded with readings that exceeded maximum sensor capacity. Lyria screamed warnings as her instruments literally caught fire from the surge. The displacement field collapsed, ship systems flickered, and beneath the oak tree, where Martha Whitaker rested, the ground began to glow. "Shut it down!" Lyria shouted. "Shut everything down!" But it was too late. The energy point wasn't responding to technology. It was responding to emotion, to Sam's terror of being removed, to Jacob's grief, to the crowd's collective determination, to 230 years of Veros's suppressed doubt finally surfacing, to Lyria's rediscovered tears. Every feeling, every memory, Every attachment concentrated in that space was feeding the convergence point, amplifying it beyond any natural limit. The energy wasn't geological, it was emotional. And forced removal wasn't extraction, it was violation. Sam felt it rising beneath his feet, felt the earth responding to grief like a tuning fork struck by the universe's cruelest hammer. He thought of Martha dying in their bedroom, her hand in his, making him promise to stay. He thought of Jacob being born under that maple. He thought of 53 years of love crystallized in 5 acres of Kansas. And the energy point responded. It detonated. Not with fire or force, but with pure concentrated feeling made manifest. A wave of emotional resonance that swept outward, visible to human eyes as golden light, measurable to alien sensors as impossible readings that broke every known law of physics. It expanded from Martha's oak in concentric circles, touching everyone in range. And for one impossible moment, every being present, human and alien alike, felt what Sam Whitaker felt. They experienced his love for Martha, his devotion to land, his promise kept across decades, his refusal to abandon what mattered even when the whole universe demanded it. They felt his grief and his joy, and his stubborn, beautiful, utterly irrational attachment to home. When the light faded, Veros was on his knees, tears streaming down his face for the first time in 200 years, remembering a homeworld he'd tried to forget. Lyria was sobbing openly, mourning the warmth her species had optimized away. The human crowd stood in shocked silence, many crying, all understanding something they couldn't articulate. And Sam Whitaker, standing in the crater where force should have destroyed him, simply looked up at the alien ships and the human crowd and the world watching and said softly, "That's what you're trying to take. That's what you're trying to optimize away. That's what you think doesn't matter." He looked at Veros. "You still think I should go?" The commander couldn't answer. Couldn't speak, could only stare at the old man who'd just proven that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or authority or galactic law. It was a human being who refused to abandon what he loved, even when love made no logical sense at all. The energy was still expanding. What started as a wave became a storm, radiating outward from Martha's oak in pulses that bent reality itself. Lyria's instruments registered readings that made no scientific sense. The convergence point wasn't just active, it was evolving, responding to emotional input like a living thing learning to breathe. And it was going to destroy everything. "It's accelerating," Lyria shouted over alarms, screaming in 14 alien languages. "If it continues at this rate, the explosion will level everything within a 100-mile radius. We have minutes, maybe less." Sam felt it too, the ground vibrating beneath his boots. The air thick with something beyond electricity, beyond physics, beyond anything Earth science had words for. This was grief weaponized, love turned destructive, memory given the power to unmake the world. He'd spent 53 years building this place with Martha. Now, in refusing to abandon it, he might destroy it anyway. "How do we stop it?" Veros demanded. But even as he asked, Sam could see the commander knew. There was only one way to stop an emotional bomb. The same way you stopped a fire. You gave it nothing left to burn. Sam would have to leave, would have to abandon his promise, his land, his wife's grave, would have to choose the world over his heart. He was starting toward the ships ready to surrender when Lyria whispered something that changed everything. "Unless..." She pulled up her readings, hands shaking. "The energy isn't destructive by nature. It's reactive. It's responding to threat, to violation, to the pain of forced removal. But look at this spike." She highlighted a section. "During your son's arrival, when he embraced you, the energy surged, but it stabilized. It transformed into something else." "I don't understand," Sam said. "It responded to reconciliation, to positive emotional resonance, to love being restored rather than destroyed." She looked up at Sam with desperate hope. "What if we don't try to suppress it? What if we redirect it? Turn grief into remembrance. Turn pain into celebration. Turn violation into... She struggled for the word. Invitation, Sam finished softly. Understanding blooming. Martha didn't want this place to be a fortress. She wanted it to be shared. She always said land isn't truly owned. It's borrowed. We're just caretakers for the next generation. He turned to face the crowd of humans and aliens, all watching, all feeling the ground shake beneath them. When he spoke, his voice carried across the field with unexpected strength. Martha planted that oak tree the day we married. She said it would outlive us both, that it would give shade to people we'd never meet, that the best gift we could give the future was roots. His voice broke but held. She was right. And I've been so focused on protecting what we built that I forgot the point of building it. She didn't plant trees just for us. She planted them for everyone. He looked at Veyros, at Lyria, at the alien soldiers and scientists, at the human crowd, at his son. You want to use the energy here? Then let's use it right. Not as something taken, but as something given. Not as conquest, but as covenant. Make this place what Martha always imagined, a space for sharing, for remembering, for teaching each other what matters. You're proposing we turn a strategic resource into a memorial? Veyros sounded bewildered. I'm proposing we turn a battlefield into a garden. The ground shook harder. Energy readings spiked toward critical. They had seconds to decide. Lyria looked at Sam, understanding dawning in her alien eyes. How do we do it? How do we transform the energy? Sam smiled, the first real smile since Martha died. We plant a tree. He didn't explain, just walked to his workshop, that beautiful controlled chaos where he'd built furniture for 50 years, and returned with a sapling. A young oak, maybe 3 feet tall, grown from an acorn from Martha's tree. He'd been saving it for something special. Couldn't think of anything more special than this. Everyone who wants to be part of this, grab a shovel. We're planting a forest. What happened next would be studied by xenoanthropologists for centuries. Humans and aliens working side by side, digging holes in Kansas soil while the earth tried to tear itself apart. Each person planting something. Trees from the nursery in town, flowers from gardens, seeds from pockets. Even Veyros, commander of the Arcturian fleet, knelt in dirt for the first time in 200 years and planted something his grandmother had given him before his world was integrated. A seed from his home, from the land he'd lost, from the place he'd spent 2 centuries trying to forget. As each plant went into the ground, something miraculous happened. The energy responded, not with destruction but with growth. Roots shot through soil at impossible speeds. Saplings became trees in seconds. Flowers bloomed in fast forward. The convergence point wasn't exploding anymore. It was creating, transforming grief into life, memory into growth, loss into legacy. Lyria planted a cutting from a bioluminescent vine native to her homeworld, extinct for 3,000 years but preserved in genetic archives. When it hit Earth soil, it blazed to life, wrapping around Sam's fence in spirals of light that pulse like heartbeats. She stood staring at it, tears streaming, touching leaves her ancestors had touched before logic replaced wonder. Jacob planted a rosebush, the same variety Martha had loved, the one he'd bought her every Mother's Day until he stopped visiting. It bloomed immediately, red flowers, bright as apologies, fragrant as forgiveness. The crowd planted hundreds more, each one a story, each one a memory, each one a promise that grief doesn't have to destroy, it can create. That the best way to honor what's lost is to grow something new. That the most powerful force in any universe isn't technology or authority, but people choosing to build together instead of tear apart. By sunset, Sam's 5 acres had become something beyond description, a garden that belonged to no one species and every species, where earth oaks grew beside alien flora, where human roses intertwined with bioluminescent vines, where every plant told a story of loss transformed into hope. The energy point stabilized completely, its power now constant and controlled, fueled not by grief, but by collective memory. Veyros stood before Sam, no longer a commander, but just a man far from home, finally understanding what home meant. "I resign my commission," he said simply. "The conglomerate can find another soldier. I'd rather stay here and learn how to be a gardener." "You're welcome anytime," Sam replied, "but maybe start with Sundays. That's when Martha and I used to have folks over. Seems right to continue the tradition." And so it began. The first Sunday, 3 alien ships parked carefully beside the barn, their pilots nervous and curious. Sam made coffee. The neighbors brought casseroles. Someone taught Veyros to play horseshoes and discovered that 2 centuries of military precision translated poorly to a game designed for drunk uncles. Lyria learned to make pie, burning 4 attempts before creating something edible while Sam patiently guided her through Martha's recipe. They talked, shared stories, learned each other's languages not through translators, but through laughter and mistakes and the universal grammar of breaking bread together. The alien soldiers traded tales of distant battles for stories about high school football. The scientists explained warp theory, while farmers explained crop rotation. Children taught children games that transcended species. By the 5th Sunday, the ships brought families. By the 10th, there was a waiting list. By the 20th, Plainview, Kansas, population 1,247, had become the unofficial cultural embassy of Earth, the spot where humanity proved that you don't integrate through force, you integrate through Sunday dinners. The conglomerate, after lengthy debates and 17 subcommittee meetings, officially designated Sam's property as a cultural exchange zone under Earth's sovereign protection. The energy point could be used, but only with Sam's permission and never in ways that violated the spirit of shared space. It became the most valuable resource on Earth not because of its power, but because of what it represented. The possibility that progress and memory didn't have to be enemies. That efficiency and emotion could coexist. That the future didn't require abandoning the past, just honoring it while building something new. Months passed. The garden grew. More species came, drawn by rumors of the place where an old man stood against an empire and won by refusing to fight. They brought seeds from their homeworlds, planted them beside his corn, shared meals on his porch, learned that the most profound truths are often the simplest. Some things are worth standing firm for. Some promises are worth keeping. Some ground is worth defending, not because it's strategic, but because it's sacred. And sacred doesn't mean untouched. It means loved enough to share. One Sunday evening, as golden light painted the sky and aliens helped load dishwashers while debating baseball statistics, Sam stood under Martha's oak and spoke to her like he did every day. "You wouldn't believe who came for dinner, sweetheart." Commander brought his daughter. Lyria's teaching at the community college now, can you imagine? That Jari pilot brought something called 7 Moon wine that tastes like burning but in a good way. And Jacob, his voice caught. Jacob's staying. Says he wants to help run the place. Says he finally understands what you were trying to teach him about roots. The wind rustled through leaves, through the oak she'd planted, and the 1,000 trees that now surrounded it. For just a moment, Sam could have sworn he heard her laugh. That sound that had been his compass for 53 years. That sound that said, "This is right. This is good. This is home." In the distance, 3 more ships approached, their running lights blinking in the twilight. New visitors, more stories, more seeds to plant. More proof that the most revolutionary act in any universe is simple hospitality. The willingness to say, "Come, sit, share what you've lost. Help me grow something beautiful from the ruins." Sam smiled, feeling Martha's presence in the wind, in the land, in every tree they'd planted and every tree others had added. They'd wanted to take his home. Instead, he'd given them one. They'd wanted to extract a resource. Instead, he taught them what resources really mattered. Not power sources or energy points or strategic advantages, but connection, memory. The stubborn, irrational, beautiful insistence that love matters more than logic. That some things can't be measured or optimized or integrated away. That humanity's greatest strength isn't technology or violence or even adaptability. It's the willingness to stand in the ruins of what matters and say, no, not this. Some things are worth being stubborn about. Some things are worth fighting the whole galaxy for. Some things are worth planting gardens over graves for. And sometimes, if you're lucky and you stand firm enough, the galaxy fights back by learning to plant gardens too. As darkness fell and lights came on in his old farmhouse, now expanded to accommodate Sunday crowds, Sam Whitaker sat on his porch and watched the universe learn to have dinner together. It wasn't the future anyone had planned. It wasn't efficient or logical or what any protocol had recommended. It was better. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the garden, beyond the ships, beyond even the stars, Sam could have sworn he heard Martha whisper what she always said when they finished planting. Now that's something worth growing. The Sunday tradition would continue for years, would spread to other planets, would become the model for integration based on invitation rather than invasion. And historians would mark it as the moment humanity taught the galaxy its most important lesson. That the fiercest battles aren't won with weapons, they're won with welcome, with coffee on the porch, with stubborn old men who love harder than empires can conquer, with the simple revolutionary act of saying to the universe, you can't take this from us, but we'll share it with you. If you're willing to remember that homes aren't resources to extract, they're stories to grow, together. And every Sunday, without fail, the ships would come, the gardens would bloom, and one old farmer would stand guard over memories that had become monuments, over grief that had become growth, over a promise kept that changed the galaxy, because some things are worth being stubborn about, and Sam Whitaker was the stubbornest of them all. Maybe the universe doesn't run on dark matter after all. Maybe it runs on stubbornness, the humankind that refuses to surrender even when the stars themselves file eviction notices. Sam Whitaker didn't save Earth with technology, strategy, or hero speeches. He did it by doing what humans do best, loving something so fiercely it rewrites the laws of physics just to stay. Turns out, home isn't a place. It's a promise you keep long after logic tells you not to. But here's the question. How much of what we call progress is just forgetting what once mattered? What would your 5 acres be? The thing you'd defend, not with weapons, but with memory. And if aliens ever came knocking on your door, would you have something worth being stubborn about? Now, tell me, traveler, what did you feel when Sam planted that last tree? Type the word stubborn in the comments if you stayed until the end and you believe some things are worth standing for. Tell me where on Earth you're watching from, your corner of this crazy, beautiful planet. And if you felt even a spark of humanity tonight, hit subscribe, like, and share this story so more people can remember what makes us, us. Next story's already growing in the soil. Click the video on your screen and come see what the galaxy learns next Sunday.